Thinking Native, 11 Insights for 2011, with your host Saul Kropman from the Digital Edge.
My name is Evan Milton. I am the Strategy Director at Stonewall, now part of the Native Tribe. And my primary involvement with regard to strategy is taking a look at what client needs are and fitting that into what the market's doing and figuring out the best way to bring a full digital campaign or digital set of strategies to market for them.
How does digital strategy differ from, say, traditional strategy?
I think there are two parts to that answer. The one is how it's the same, and the other one is how digital strategy would be different. So I think strategy in any sphere would involve first of all, finding out as many insights as you can, so truly understanding what the problem is, what the objectives are, what the context is, and that I think would be the same across any kind of agency. And in a traditional agency, you'd then come up with a communications plan, typically. We would do a fairly similar thing inside a digital environment. The real big difference, though, of course, is that the way that you interact with people in the digital space is much more about exactly that, an interaction. It's not just a set of messages that are being pushed out into media spaces that you purchased. And I think when we get to grips with that, that's where digital strategy differs a lot. The other area where it differs a lot would be that in order to get things right in the digital space, you have to understand the technology that you're using to deliver them. And that doesn't mean that someone like me needs to really understand all the stuff that the genius coders do and how the designers design things and all of that, because I don't think any one person could understand that. But what it does mean is that you need to understand how things work inside a social network. You need to understand how people are using their cellular telephones. You need to understand what, if anything, the impact of things like the iPad and the tablets are going to be, etc. And I don't really think that in the traditional space people have to worry about exactly how the platform and the tech affect things that much. Because we've had radio and print and TV for so long, everyone more or less understands that inherently.
Cool. All right. Well, you and I are talking trends today. Let's jump straight into that. What are the top 5 trends that you're looking forward to in 2011?
So this is always a damning kind of question, because you can be as vague as you want, and then you'll definitely be right, or you can be very precise, and then it might be that you're completely wrong. So some of these in the top 5 I think are quite vague, perhaps, and some of them I think are fairly precise. And we can chat again at the end of the year and see if I'm spot on or not. So the top 5, I think, are, the first one is the rise of the truly integrated campaign, and we can unpack that as we chat through. Then what I've classed together as the mobile revolution, which deals with everything from smartphones through to convergence and geolocation and things like that. And I think the next one is at a more societal level, and that is the big change that is happening because of digital around privacy and our understanding of what exactly privacy is and what it means to be in a community space. And then our fourth one, I think we need to unpack exactly what's going on in the geosocial environment. So adding the fact that you can geo-target and geolocate to the fact that we have mobile devices in our pockets more or less everywhere we go. And then the final one is just understanding where social networks are going to be going in 2011. And that deals with everything from how Facebook has risen to rival Google in terms of hits, through to things like social search and video as social networks. So those would be the top 5.
Cool. Well, let's go straight into the first one, which would be the integrated campaign. What exactly is an integrated campaign, and how is digital going to help that?
I'm going to flip that around. I don't think digital is going to help it. I think if digital is not there, it's not an integrated campaign. In order for it to be an integrated campaign, there needs to be a digital component. So what we mean by integrated campaigns, and why I think that's going to be a significant trend in 2011, is that integrated campaigns involve, at their core, some kind of way that your message that you send out as a brand or a marketer can be engaged with and interacted with by your audience. So it changes that push-out communication that we used to have in a traditional space into being something that people can create a bit of a dialogue around or form a community around, or whatever the case might be. I think that that's going to be such a big trend in 2011 for a couple of reasons. One of them is that during 2010, we've seen the rise of those kinds of things. So very good examples in the international space are things like the Old Spice campaign, Best Buy's 12th Force, things like the Skittles campaigns. In South Africa, I think their great example is around 2010, so the Nike Right the Future campaign is a very good example of that. Increasing use of platform thinking, where people are actually getting some utility value out of a campaign and want to stay involved with it, rather than having brands or marketers pay money to convince people to be involved with something. I think that's growing out. So I've got a bit of a weird example for that in the South African sense, which isn't that integrated yet, perhaps. But if we take a look at SARS and the way they've managed to win hearts and minds, and no one's really a fan of the tax man, but if you look at how they've done things over the past 5 years or so, they've done a lot of digital changes that make our lives easier as beleaguered taxpayers. And they've done what a brand should always do, which is explain quite honestly what they're doing and why they're doing it. And most taxpayers understand now that it's necessary for them to slice a pot of their hard-earned cash off to somebody else so that we can have roads and healthcare and aid charities and those kinds of things.
Evan, let me ask you a question though. Isn't this complicated from a client perspective? You're going to have to deal with multiple agencies when it comes to an integrated campaign.
I think it certainly is difficult for clients. Obviously, one of the things that we're trying to do with Native is to make that confusion a little bit simpler for clients, and that at least as far as digital goes, they only have one agency that they need to deal with, because now that Native has seen the merger of three agencies that had skill sets in different kind of digital spheres, you've got an integrated offering that truly is as close to full service as anything could be. Ben Wagner's got a great comment there, as he always says that clients would like to have one neck to strangle or one hand to shake. Generally, when he says that in pitches with me, he points to me, which I'm not quite sure what that means. But the point being that a client, it is difficult for clients to understand what's going on in the digital space. 5 years ago, you had one bunch of people that make websites. Now you have an agency of 20 people that is focused on the narrowest focus of really complex SEO algorithms. And how do clients understand that and deal with that? And the answer to that is if you want to get involved in truly integrated campaigns as a client or pushing your brand, you need to involve digital right from the beginning. We need to have campaigns that can be executed in a digital space, and that means involving digital and traditional thinking in terms of advertising right at the beginning.
What about the expenses? Surely that's quite expensive to have multiple agencies?
Possibly, but brands probably have multiple agencies already. If you take a look at the most obvious example of traditional agency, you'd have some kind of lead agency, they come up with a concept, and then they hire a production company to make a television ad for them. Sure, you may be only dealing with one set of account service people, but you've basically got two agencies there, one who's coming up with the concept and one is actually making the TV ad. And that production company probably has multiple agencies underneath it. So I don't think the cost model changes particularly much for clients. If you need to get your message out, it requires a certain amount of money to come up with a good concept. It requires a certain amount of money to account manage all of those things, the inevitable toing and froing. And then there's a certain amount of money for production and maintenance thereafter. What is relevant in terms of cost, though, is that in the digital space, you're probably going to be able to shave some costs off for the simple reason that in terms of engaging in ongoing dialogue with your clients or your consumers, which is something that you would do if you had a proper integrated digital campaign, means that you are probably going to have fewer people coming into your call center. You're probably going to pick up any problems that might exist with your brand earlier on and have fewer crises. It means you can talk to people by means of earned media rather than having to pay for every single placement of your message, and various other cost savings like that.
What about the sort of measurement aspect of it? How do you measure a traditional campaign and an online campaign?
That's one of those great examples of the devil being in the detail. Certainly, one of you asked for top 5 trends, but getting deeper down that list, I would say number 6 is around data and algorithms, and one subset of data is exactly that. It's metrics, and we know we can measure things very effectively inside the digital space. Measurement is only as good as the analysis that you place on it afterwards, and I would go one step further to say that measurement and analysis are only as good as whatever actions you perform after you've gained an insight as to how something performed. When we start looking at truly tracking things across different mediums, you get into an interesting space, because we see it quite a lot in old-style digital space. We can make a really great website, we can run a very effective campaign, but how do we actually track whether that campaign got people through the front door of the shop? How do we track whether that sold more tickets or sold more cans of beans, or whatever the case might be? And until you do very sophisticated integration, it will always be tricky to track that. Having said that, there are very effective means we can build in, if we know what our objectives are right at the beginning, to track exactly what our digital objectives are and how well we've delivered on those.
Let's move on to your second prediction, which is what you call the mobile revolution. We've heard that mobile is going to be the big thing probably since 2006, 2007, 2008, so on and so forth. What's going to make 2011 different, though?
I don't think it's going to make it different. Mobile has been one of the big things since it started, arrived on the scene for very obvious reasons. Is suddenly you can do things away from your desk that you used to have to do stuck to your desk. So I don't think there's anything different about it being one of the key parts of the revolution. What is different is the way that revolution is going to change. And I think there's sort of three angles into that we can talk about. The first one is that smartphones used to be the province of only the real top end of the market, just because of the expense of the actual handset and because data charges to use it in any kind of sensible way were pretty prohibitive. What we see now, and partly I think it's driven by the iPhone being such a popular device, it really grabbed the public attention, even though many people who might desire one certainly can't afford it, or it's lower down than other priorities. But what we see now is BlackBerry phones that are a staple of any kind of corporate workforce. They're getting more like smartphones. In fact, they are smartphones already. And then we see the rise of the Android operating system, which means that there are a range of not yet budget, but relatively affordable smartphones out there, and the carriers, the mobile networks, are certainly using those as a means to market, because they know they need to move their revenues from just voice into data as well. So what we have is two things. At the top end, you've got whatever the next iPhone is going to be able to do, and whatever the next great BlackBerry is going to do. And then the middle end of the market, you've got phones that are very capable of searching the web, allowing you to connect to Facebook and Twitter from your phone, allowing you to communicate by voice over IP, allowing you to do GPS satellite route direction finding, and a whole lot of things like that. And those will be penetrating lower and lower into the market. And so more and more people have smartphones. It means that as a brand, you have more and more ways of communicating with people with the technology that's in their pocket. And in South Africa, that's particularly important, because that third screen, the mobile screen, is something that a lot more people have than we have in terms of computers that we can access people with.
What about things like apps? I mean, you talk about smartphones. Will people be building apps this year, or will it be more website or mobile websites, shall we say?
I think I'll dodge that question by saying that ways of delivering applications will certainly grow on smartphones. Whether they are true apps that are actually built for that platform, or whether they're kind of mock apps, in other words, mobile sites that have been bundled and delivered in some kind of app way, I think there's a question that only the purists would really want to know the answer to. The fact of the matter is that for me as a consumer, there will be more and more things that I can do on my phone, and we've already seen the rise of decent payment systems coming on even really low-end phones. M-Pesa is finally in South Africa. It's been in Africa for almost 5 years now, but it's great that it's finally here, a proper payment mechanism, through to things like more and more people actually have GPS or near GPS on their phones. Used to be you had to have the most expensive satellite tracking system to be able to get from A to B. That was only 5 years ago. Now, if you've got a phone that can browse the web, you can get Google Maps on your phone, and you can get to wherever you need to. So whether that's a true app or a bundled website, I think is not that important. The fact of the matter is there are ways that people will be able to get data onto their phones and communicate with one another and communicate with brands in quite a nice and relatively sexy environment on their phone.
What are the best ways of actually targeting users on a cell phone? Would it be mobile ads, or are there better ways?
First thing to do, as with all things, and this is the standard kind of answer I'd hope you get from digital strategists, is you need to know what you want to do, what exactly are your objectives, and you need to know what your target market is, and you also need to know what the context is. So if you're talking to a lower end of a market that doesn't have particularly sophisticated phones, then obviously releasing an iPhone app's not going to work for them. What you want to do there is you want to do something that's perhaps running through Mixit and using USSD technology. And brands should certainly not be shy about doing that. I'll just diverge for a second to make a comment on that. Something that surprised me a lot during 2010 with recession economics being in place was that the mobile value-added service providers were quite hard hit. And I was personally surprised by that, because if I'd been a marketer, that's one of the places where you can get direct communication with your consumer base, and you can measure it very well, and it's relatively inexpensive. And what occurred to me was that if the crunch had hit about 5 years ago, web would probably have suffered a lot. The internet industry and agencies such as Native would have been hard hit, because the way the clients didn't really understand that the web was a good place to be and that internet worked. Hopefully we don't hit another recession in about 5 years, but if we do, I can tell you now that definitely mobile will not be one of the areas that suffers in terms of budgets being taken away from them. Why I mention that anecdote is just to say that moving into 2011, I think more and more marketers are understanding that mobile is definitely a way to go, whether it's from a sort of bottom-end SMS campaign that gives you, 50 Rand airtime reward, or whether it's right through to the top end, which is a really sophisticated, probably better experience that you might even get on a computer screen, that is some kind of app that is giving you all the utility that you require, a very sticky kind of a device, something that you really want to be playing with.
Well, that kind of brings us to your fifth prediction, which is the rise of social networks in 2011, or the continued rise of social networks. What do you think is going to be big in 2011?
I think the setting the groundwork there, so taking a look at the context, is just how much Facebook has grown. So internationally, it's already got more users than big things like AOL. It's starting to rival Google effectively in terms of searches and references to sites. There are predictions that it's going to be, bigger than Yahoo is in terms of carrying multimedia content, et cetera, et cetera. So the point is that Facebook is getting much, much bigger, and it's in South Africa where we see a mirror of that in a way. It's getting close to one-to-one penetration in South Africa, more or less. If you're on the internet at all, you're on Facebook. It's not exactly a one-to-one parity, but it's growing close to that. The other thing that happened in 2010 is that people have spoken about it's the year that your parents joined Facebook, because it's become so ubiquitous. So that's one part of setting the scene and the context, is that social networks are not this weird new thing that only digital marketers understand. Pretty much everybody's on them. They use them for whatever it is that they use them to do. That continued growth and where that goes to is going to be the really interesting thing in 2011. And I think one of the key things there is that a buzz phrase that I started using during 2010, which is talking about mass one-to-one communication, which obviously is a paradox. It's something that doesn't make sense. But if you're a brand who's talking to your users inside a social network in a kind of one-to-one way, they do have something of a one-to-one relationship with you, and yet you're able to do that in a mass kind of environment. That's a very new thing. A possibility like that has never existed before, where you can have a dialogue that really is one-to-one with a whole lot of people more or less at the same time. And brands that are savvy and on that will stand themselves in good stead, if and only if they can do it properly, if they really immerse themselves in it and understand what it means to be in that space, which is that it is about communication and dialogue. It's about creating content that is as much influenced by what your users and consumers are saying as it is by what the message is that head office or your brand manager says you have to push out there. And that kind of goes full circle to our initial point, which is talking about integrated campaigns, is we should be pushing community involvement or social network involvement in all of the campaigns that we do, because it's in getting that one-to-one dialogue going with consumers that we're able to actually establish a relationship with them, and through that build the brand, as well as doing all those good things like enhancing CSI, understanding what it is that consumers might want, doing a bit of research, doing any damage control that might be necessary, etc.
So 2010 was the year that your parents got on Facebook. Will 2011 be the year that your grandparents get on Facebook?
It's a great question. In terms of the theory, your grandparents are already on Facebook. We have to stick to our guns here and say that everybody is on Facebook. I think that 2011, rather than being a place where Facebook grows even more, because we kind of know that's going to happen, 2011 becomes the place where social networks are more understood as something that is happening all the time, and they're understood as part of the general marketing mix because they have become part of our general social fabric. Something that I pointed out a lot in 2009 and 2010 is there's nothing new about social networks. We've always had them because we went to school with a bunch of people and we're still friends with them. We play a particular sport with another bunch of people. We're part of a cultural activity with another bunch of people. So social networks are not new. The fact that they're in the digital space is very, very new. And the fact that I can be in a social network with people who are geographically very far removed from me, that is new. And what 2011 is about is seeing how that continues to grow and change. And a couple of headline points on that one is social search is definitely on the rise and going to become even bigger than it is, by which I mean that instead of going to Google, which uses a complex algorithm to figure out what I don't know, I'm looking for a pair of shoes or whatever, give me some recommendations on that. Now I'll be asking those kinds of things in a social network and getting direct recommendations from my friends. That's been happening for some time already. We see some of the big brands and platforms are moving into that. Yahoo and Bing have merged. What is that going to mean? You've got a search engine that's merged with a social network. How is that going to work? Another one of the headline elements there in terms of social networks in 2011 is the way that video and video watching has become its own social network. Obviously, that's much bigger in countries that have good bandwidth, so the US and all around Europe, etc., and of course in the East. But you've got 10 billion videos that are streamed in the US per month, and you've got something like 4 billion video ads that are viewed. So, that kind of model is also going to start coming into South Africa more and more. And it's for us as a digital agency to be able to advise clients on how to engage with that properly and how to understand and manage all of these new mediums and all these new routes to market and the communication they offer.
Evan, I'm kind of cynical. I mean, I often find that when a brand talks to me on something like Facebook, it comes across as a bit insincere. Are there any tips you can give brands and marketers to not come across as insincere?
Yeah, the key one would be don't be insincere. If you want to be taken seriously and you want to be sincere, then do so. Don't lie to people. Don't and take that very seriously. You shouldn't lie about any component of something. If you say we'll try and help you with your product problem and get back to you within 24 hours, well then make sure you do, and don't say that you can help people with a product if you can't actually. The analogy that I use there that I think works quite well is that it's a bit like being at a restaurant and dealing with a waiter. Ultimately, the waiter can't control what the chef is doing on that particular night. But what the waiter can do is tell you everything that you need to know and get you up to speed and make your experience while you're waiting for the food to come out, or if you have a complaint about it, or whatever those cases might be, can make your experience a whole lot better. And I think that's probably the best kind of tip for brands that are going into the social media spaces. And if you're willing to properly engage with your community, think very seriously about whether it's worth doing it. And then the other thing is work out what you can actually change and prepare yourself, using that analogy, for the waiter to come back to the chef with some recommendations at a point and saying, guy, everybody is saying that the soup is too salty. We're going to need to change our fundamental product now. And if you're a brand who's on board to actually do that, then you stand yourself in good stead to be able to increase market share and increase brand loyalty. And I think you won't come across as insincere, because you are, in fact, being sincere. Evan,
you were a judge at the bookmarks this year. Are we sort of relatively well advanced compared to the rest of the world, or are we lagging behind in terms of digital marketing?
I think the bookmarks continue to strive for global excellence. and what we see in the awards that were handed out there in the agency category certainly is that there were no golds. So it was a year again of silvers and bronzes, which I think disappointed a lot of people. Certainly wearing my hat as an agency person, I was rooting for being able to, be part of an agency that had a gold award. I don't think that our work is particularly far behind any of the more developed internet territories. I think that contextually our work is pretty darn good. We have a very unique set of challenges here, and I think our agencies and publishers are rising to that challenge. Speaking with the international judges for the bookmarks, they pointed out that it's very difficult to win a bookmark, more difficult in fact to win a bookmark than it is to win many of the international awards, for the simple reason that the way the criterion for judging them is that awards have to be very good in terms of their results, very good in terms of their creative, very innovative in terms of their technology, and very well executed. And that's a pretty tall order, especially given local budgets. Are we on par with what's happening globally? I think we can do a whole lot to improve, but I would say that, yeah, we're definitely in the running. And if you transposed any of our top agencies into an international space told them up appropriately, we'd be able to compete absolutely.
Anything you could point out that needs to change before we can become international?
Well, as per my answer, I think our standards are international already, but things that can be improved upon, I think, is again going back to that basics, is sitting judging the bookmarks. One of the components of the entries was that people needed to say what the objectives were and then prove how they measured them and then prove how their results had achieved those objectives. And it was clear in some cases that the objectives hadn't been properly worked out and thought through, and if that hasn't been done, then how can you have proper measurements and proper results from that? Probably, at a guess, that problem lies between client and agency. It's a hat that both of them need to wear, if that makes any sense. Client needs to be clear what its objectives are. Agencies need to work out how they will achieve those results, and then metrics need to be agreed upon to prove that. So I think in terms of raising our standard, it's about that interaction. I don't think that we have problems in terms of our creative. I don't think we've got problems in terms of our execution or in terms of our media planning and delivery to market. Where I think it falls down the most is that we've got to work out within in a global scale, the limited budgets that we have, how exactly we're going to achieve a very defined objective, how that's going to be measured, and then importantly for clients is how you then feed that back and make your next campaign even better and sell more of whatever it is you want to sell.
Thinking Native is a part of the Making of Native, a 4-month journey into the making of South Africa's newest full-service agency. For more insights with Native's leading thinkers, visit us on www.native.co today or follow us on @NativeSpeak.